I spent the entire morning tying ribbons around the silverware. My hands shook a little. Arthritis may be nerves, but I wanted everything to look just right. Christmas was the only time I ever got them all under one roof. Ezra, Nolan, Brenda. Even if they were always late, even if their smiles rarely reached their eyes anymore, the tamales had been steaming since dawn. I'd made them the old way by hand with pork and red chile, just like my mother used to. The candles flickered softly along the windowsill, dancing shadows across the photographs of birthdays, graduations, long-forgotten smiles. I laid out the best plates I had, bone white with thin gold rims only used once a year. They arrived at 7, late as usual. Ezra didn't kiss my cheek. Nolan gave me a half hug. Brenda was too busy checking her phone. She wore a green satin dress that shimmered under the lights too much for a gathering like ours, but maybe that was the point. She looked me up and down, once didn't say a word. Dinner was quiet at first. I tried to ask about Nolan's job at the tech startup, but he shrugged. Ezra was too busy scrolling and Brenda had already finished half her wine. I tried again about New Year's plans this time, and Ezra muttered something about probably just flying to Tulum. So I said it gently, like a joke that I'd picked up some extra work helping with someone's taxes, so I could afford Christmas gifts for them all. That the $15,000 I'd spent this year was my way of still feeling useful. Ezra's fork clattered onto his plate. "Get out," he said loud and sharp. "Paying bills doesn't make you family." The room froze. I looked at Nolan. He looked at his hands. Brenda leaned in close, her perfume thick and expensive. "You're just jealous of my mom," she whispered. "She doesn't need to remind us what she gives." I nodded slowly and got up to refill the pitcher of punch. They didn't notice the porcelain angel on the bookshelf behind me, where my old iPhone had been recording since they walked in. The battery still had 4 hours left. I didn't cry that night. I washed the dishes with steady hands, letting the water scald my knuckles until they turned red. The tamales no one finished went into containers. The tablecloth I ironed twice was stained with wine. Brenda spilled, but didn't bother to wipe. I moved slowly, not because I was tired, but because I needed the silence to stretch long enough to swallow the words they'd thrown at me. Upstairs, I opened my laptop. It hummed to life, that same humming noise that had comforted me on quiet nights after my husband passed. I logged into the bank portal first. The screen blinked back a summary of my monthly transfers, almost $3,000 every 30 days, like clockwork. Mortgage assistance for Ezra and Brenda canceled. Car payment for Nolan canceled. Credit card help, student loans, health insurance premiums, all canceled. Each cancellation felt like snipping a thread I'd sewn into them over decades. They had no idea how tightly I'd stitched myself into their lives. They never noticed, or maybe they did, and they just never cared. I opened the family group chat. The thread was still there, filled with old pictures, birthdays, a blurry Thanksgiving selfie, a joke meme Nolan sent last week. My thumbs hovered over the keyboard. Let her pay the $15,000 then. I looked at the message for a long time. The words felt right. Sharp. Clean. But I didn't hit send. I closed the chat and stared at the photo on my desk, Ezra in his high school graduation robe, arms thrown around my shoulders, beaming. I remember that day. I had skipped work and borrowed money to get him that suit. I shut the laptop. The house creaked. A cold draft slipped under the kitchen door, brushing against my feet. I stood there for a while, staring at the darkened window, my own reflection faint in the glass. Then I walked to the hallway closet, reached behind the coats, and pulled out a small suitcase. Dust clung to the leather handle. I set it by the front door. By the time the sun stretched across my windows, I had already showered, dressed, and brewed coffee I didn't drink. My phone buzzed once, then again. Then it wouldn't stop. First came the texts, short-clipped, increasingly frantic. Ezra. Mom, did you change something with the autopay, Brenda? Why is the mortgage company calling me? This is really unprofessional. Nolan. Hey, I think something's wrong with my car loan. Then the voicemails started piling up. One caught my eye. Ezra's voice sharp but shaky. Mom, why are the banks saying our payments bounced? What did you do? I didn't reply. I poured the cold coffee down the sink and wheeled my suitcase to the front door. The wheels wobbled against the cracked sidewalk. As I walked to the curb, hailed a cab, and told the driver to take me downtown. When he asked which hotel, I smiled. The one with the piano in the lobby, I said. He raised his eyebrows slightly. I didn't explain. By 11, Ezra and Brenda's SUV was gone. The repo team worked fast. I heard later that Brenda ran out barefoot yelling at the driver, swearing that it had to be a mistake. It wasn't. While they scrambled, I sat in a velvet armchair in the lobby of the Evermere, a place I had only entered once when I dropped off tax forms for one of my old clients. The receptionist called me ma'am and offered me water with cucumber slices. I handed over my ID and the credit card tied to an account none of them knew existed. When she slid the key card across the counter, she said, "Enjoy your stay, Ms. Serrano." I nodded, but I didn't smile. The suite overlooked the river. It had a soaking tub, fresh orchids by the window, and thick curtains that shut out the world. I placed my suitcase beside the armoire and let the silence wrap itself around me. On the desk, I placed my phone and turned off notifications. Then I pulled out the small notebook where I'd written every debt I'd covered for them. I underlined every line with red ink. There was a time when skipping lunch didn't feel like a sacrifice. I'd sit in the break room with a cup of instant coffee smiling while everyone else pulled out their sandwiches and leftovers. They'd ask, "You not hungry, Elmira?" and I'd laugh and say, "Too busy to eat." The truth was, Ezra's textbooks that semester cost more than my rent. I made it work. I always made it work. I remember the day he got into Northeastern. He handed me the acceptance letter with shaking hands. "We did it, Mom," he said. I hugged him so tight he gasped. We, as if he knew. As if he truly saw how many nights I spent buried in numbers, filing taxes for neighbors, tutoring part-time clipping coupons, like prayers. When Nolan started his business, I was the first to believe in him. When it collapsed in its third year, I sold the only real jewelry I owned, my engagement ring. I told him it was just stuff and he cried when I handed him the check. "I'll pay you back, Mom," he said. He never did. Instead, somewhere along the way, my help became expected. The gratitude faded. The requests multiplied. I stopped buying new shoes. I wore the same winter coat for 8 years. I cut my own hair. Not once did I complain, not when the furnace broke, and I layered myself in 3 sweaters, not when I got the flu, and still showed up to file Brenda's taxes for free. All I ever asked was to be included, to be treated like I mattered beyond what I could offer. But every time I brought up how hard things had been, how much I gave, they'd say, "Why do you always bring that up?" Or, "It's not a competition, Mom." They acted like my memories were shameful, like recounting the sacrifices was manipulative, but I never wanted a medal. I just didn't want to be invisible. Sitting on the hotel bed, I thought about all those uneaten meals, all the things I went without so they could have more. And then I remembered something else, something they didn't know. It was something in Brenda's voice that night, cutting superior, that stayed with me. "You're just jealous of my mom." That smug tone, like I was beneath her, like I'd never measure up. I didn't care about wealth, not really, but something about the way she weaponized it. It made me wonder. So I made a phone call. An old client of mine, Martin, owed me a favor. He wasn't flashy, but he knew how to find things. Quietly, legally, discreetly. I gave him one name, Celestina Parrish, Brenda's mother. Supposed pillar of luxury, the woman Brenda held over me like a trophy. It didn't take long. Martin emailed me a slim PDF, only 10 pages, but every line was gold. Celestina had filed bankruptcy twice in the past 10 years. She was currently employed part-time at a clearance furniture store off Route 7, making just over minimum wage. Her house, a rented duplex with 2 missed payments. Her car was leased. Her jewelry, according to the last divorce filing, was appraised and listed, none of it real. All cubic zirconia and plated chains. I read the file twice. Then I leaned back and let myself laugh. Not loud, not bitter. Just quiet, relieved maybe. Not because she was struggling, but because the lie was finally in my hands. Brenda, who couldn't even look up from her phone to thank me for Christmas dinner, had built an entire persona around a fantasy, and I had let her make me feel small for it. 2 days later, Brenda posted a photo of herself and Celestina on Instagram. They were at some holiday party, glasses in hand, smiling under chandeliers. The caption read, "So proud to be her daughter. A real queen." I clicked the little heart under the post and liked it. Then I opened the comment section and wrote 3 words, "Elegance runs deep." That was all. But I knew Brenda would see it. She'd read between the lines. She'd wonder if I knew. And the best part was I wasn't even close to finished. The house on Hawthorne Avenue had always felt more like a museum than a home. Ezra and Brenda moved in 5 years ago after pleading that it was the only way to stay afloat. I let them, of course. I even helped renovate the kitchen. Brenda insisted on marble countertops, said laminate was for people who gave up. I didn't argue. I let them change the curtains, repaint the walls, hang their oversized wedding photo above the fireplace. But one thing I never changed, never touched, never signed, was the deed. After my husband died, the house technically reverted fully to me. I had meant to transfer it to Ezra. We even filled out some paperwork, but I never filed it. Something about the way Brenda had spoken to me even back then made me pause. Maybe I had known even before they turned cruel. I pulled out the manila folder that had gathered dust in my bedroom drawer. The lawyer's business card was still clipped inside. I called him, set an appointment, and brought the original documents. He looked them over, nodded once. "You never transferred title. It's yours, Elmira." Within days, he handled the listing. A small white and blue sign appeared on the lawn the following week, "For sale by owner." I didn't tell them. But Brenda found out the moment a couple in a hybrid pulled into the driveway for a showing. Ezra showed up at my hotel before I'd finished my tea. "You can't do this," he said, his voice breaking. "This is our home." I folded the real estate brochure and set it down beside me. "No," I said calmly. "It's my home. I just let you live in it." He shook his head like a boy who had dropped something he thought was unbreakable. "You said this was ours." "No," I replied, "you assumed it was." When he left, he didn't slam the door, didn't yell. He just looked tired. Hollow. That evening, I signed the acceptance on an all-cash offer. Closing was scheduled in 10 days. I didn't send the full recording. That would have been overkill. Just 2 short clips, enough to reveal character, not destroy it. One was Brenda leaning in and saying, "You're just jealous of my mom." The other was Ezra. Louder. Angrier. "Paying bills doesn't make you family." I trimmed the audio-added timestamps and sent the files to Brenda's employer from a temporary email account I created that morning. No name, no explanation. Just the subject line. "Thought you should hear how your leadership speaks about elders." I didn't expect a reply. I didn't need one. 2 days later, I checked her company's social page. Brenda's profile had vanished. By the end of the week, her name was removed from the leadership roster. The Instagram that once overflowed with filtered selfies and motivational quotes had gone silent. I bought a silk blouse the same day. It had been decades since I'd purchased anything new that wasn't from a clearance rack. I let the boutique associate fuss over me, bringing different colors, different cuts. I left with 2 dresses, 3 tops, and a satisfaction money alone couldn't buy. Afterward, I booked a full spa day. Facial massage, manicure. I let myself enjoy the warmth of human touch without urgency, without debt behind it. When the masseuse asked if I had any tension in my shoulders, I almost laughed. I told her, not anymore. Back at the hotel, I slipped into one of the new blouses and sat at the writing desk by the window. The sun was beginning to set over the city skyline. I opened my notebook again, not to cross things out this time, but to write something new. Closure doesn't always arrive with apology. Sometimes it walks in quietly wearing pearls. I closed the notebook and picked up the phone. Not to call Ezra or Nolan. I had someone else in mind. The cousin who gossiped too much, the one always eager to stir drama at brunch. I knew exactly what to say. They didn't ask me directly. Ezra called my sister thinking I wouldn't answer him, and he was right. He left messages full of vague sorrow and talk of misunderstandings, sprinkled with concern for my well-being. Brenda sent one text with a heart emoji and the words, "Can we talk like family?" Eventually, I said yes, but not in my home and not in theirs. I asked my sister Cora if she'd host. She hesitated at first but agreed after hearing my tone. It's not a reunion, I told her. It's a reckoning. I arrived early dressed in quiet, elegance, black pantsuit, pearl studs, nothing flashy but not one thread they had ever seen before. Cora opened the door and gasped. "You look like someone they'd never dare to disappoint," she whispered. I smiled. Exactly. Ezra and Brenda came together, their expressions carefully composed. Brenda's face was taut with nerves. Ezra opened his arms halfway toward me. I took a step back and pulled 3 envelopes from my bag, one each for them and one for Nolan, who'd conveniently said he couldn't make it. I handed them out without a word and sat down on the sofa across from them. They opened the envelopes slowly. Inside the first, a notarized update removing them from my will. Inside the second, a spreadsheet detailing every dollar I had paid on their behalf over the past 15 years. Mortgages, tuition car notes, insurance. A red line at the bottom marked final transaction. Inside the third, a printed photo of my hotel suite plush, airy, overlooking the water. "I'm not angry," I said, crossing one leg over the other. "I'm uninterested." Ezra's face twitched, but he said nothing. Brenda looked like she might speak, but I didn't give her the chance. I stood up, gathered my bag, and thanked Cora for the tea. Before leaving, I turned once more toward them and added, "Next time you want something from me, ask yourselves what I'd get in return." I walked out the door without looking back. The taxi was waiting. The city lights blinked through the floor-to-ceiling windows scattered across the river like sparks that had nowhere else to land. I sat curled on the velvet armchair with a cup of chamomile tea, my phone resting face down on the side table. I had turned the ringer off days ago, but the buzzing hadn't stopped. I finally flipped it over and skimmed the notifications. News outlets, podcasts, even a daytime talk show I used to watch while folding laundry wanted an interview. The subject lines were all the same. Mother cuts off ungrateful family, retired woman reclaims power. Matriarch becomes millionaire in silence. I didn't reply. Scrolling through social media, I saw Ezra's company had scrubbed his profile from their website. A LinkedIn post from a former client called him ethically compromised. Brenda's boutique had gone from weekly fashion content to a blank account. A tweet from someone who used to work with her said, "She treats people like props." I sipped my tea. It had cooled, but I didn't mind. It wasn't revenge. Not really. I didn't need them punished. I just needed space to breathe without their expectations pressing down on my chest like a tax I could never pay off. They had taken my love and repackaged it as obligation. They turned my care into a bill they resented. All I ever wanted was to be part of their lives as a person, not a wallet, not a backup plan. The silence in the suite felt decadent. No one asking for favors. No loud voices. just the gentle hum of the air vent and the ticking of my watch. I looked around the room at the robe hanging on the bathroom door, at the slippers tucked under the chair, at the bottle of wine I hadn't opened. This wasn't a vacation. It was a rebirth. I took out a clean page from my notebook and wrote a single sentence. Peace isn't quiet. It's freedom from being needed for the wrong reasons. Then I opened the drawer and took out the envelope I had kept hidden. Until now, the one marked with Nolan's name. Spring arrived quietly. I bought a small cottage by a lake just outside of Providence. The realtor seemed surprised when I paid in cash but didn't ask questions. The house had chipped shutters and a porch that creaked in protest, but it was mine. Fully mine. I painted the walls in warm, forgiving colors, sunflower yellow in the kitchen, deep teal in the reading nook. I started painting again, something I hadn't done since before the boys were born. Landscapes at first, then faces I didn't know, but somehow felt familiar. I learned to bake sourdough from scratch. The first loaf was a disaster. The second was passable. By the fifth, I no longer missed store-bought bread. The phone still buzzed from time to time, Ezra with his stilted apologies, Nolan with his vague updates, Brenda with silence, and then, oddly, a photo of a sonogram I didn't ask for. I stopped responding. Not to punish, just to preserve what little of myself I'd reclaimed. One morning, a producer from a local radio station called. They'd been following the story and asked if I'd speak on air. I declined the first 3 times. Then I said yes. It wasn't about attention. It was about owning my voice publicly, finally. They asked polite questions. About family. About forgiveness. About letting go. And then, toward the end, the host leaned in and asked, "Do you miss them?" I paused. Not to dramatize, just to search for honesty. "I miss the version of them I thought existed," I said. The line hung in the studio for a moment before the host moved on. But I knew it would stick with the listeners. It had stuck with me for months. That evening, I walked down to the lake and sat with my feet in the water. The surface reflected a woman I could finally recognize, one not bent by guilt or sacrifice, one who didn't need to explain her worth anymore. And as the wind picked up across the water, I whispered to myself the truth I had waited decades to say out loud. Giving doesn't make you family. Respect does.